Hey guys, Parfax here. Today we are going to discuss if New World is going to be the next big MMO. All right, let's get started. All right, so when we're going to talk about the next big MMO, we've got to really break it down to what do we mean. So typically when people say the next big MMO, they're typically talking about something along the lines of WoW, something along the lines of Final Fantasy, ESO. Those are kind of the three standard big MMOs, that are out there right now, at least for the NA. The thing is, there's not going to be an MMO that is going to reach those standards right at launch. You're like, Parfax, no. Let me talk about it right here. Because look, those games, none of them had good launches. Everybody talks about WoW as being the standard. I know that Final Fantasy now is the biggest MMO out there, but everybody's talked about WoW as being, the king of MMOs. But even at WoW's launch, it was crap. Now, we have, in some ways, higher standards than we did back then. In some ways, we have lower standards. But we really got to describe what it means to be the next big MMO. So first, I think we can all agree that it needs to be something bigger than Bless. It's got to be something bigger than, a lot of these other small niche MMOs that come out, even Crowfall. As much as I love Crowfall's not a very big MMO. So it's got to really hit above there. So let's go back to when's the last big MMO that's came out that has succeeded. The last one that I can think of, and it's borderline big MMO, would be probably BDO. Now, BDO has taken a lot of hit in its player base, and mainly that's because of its pay model, and they went more to the pay to win route, and they made things even more grindy than they originally were. So that's kind of taken people off BDO a little bit, and their population has actually died down a little bit from it. But in all terms, it's still a very successful MMO, and it still has a pretty big population. Now, so if you don't think that's a big MMO, the next one would probably be something like Guild Wars. Now, it'll be hard to judge specific games when you compare them to free-to-play games, because free-to-play games will always just have more players for the most part. At least they have inflated player bases because people can get free accounts and they're more willing to do a lot of stuff with their accounts. They'll be more willing to cheat and stuff like that. It's just the nature of the business. So they naturally have inflated numbers. But something like Guild Wars is also a pretty decent MMO. It's probably right around, I think, the size of Black Desert currently. So when I judge whether it's going to be the next big MMO, I judge whether it's going to, in the next couple years, become a big MMO. And by big, I mean something Black Desert size or above. Now, when it comes to New World, we're going to break it down in a couple different avenues. We're going to break it down PvE and PvP, because in order to become a big MMO, you have to have something there that really keeps the player base. Now, when it comes to PvE, which is the easier one to talk about, they have a decent baseline of stuff to do. They have some dungeons, they have some endgame dungeons, they have endgame PvE, they have these invasions, they have corruptions. So they have, and they even have a PvE/PvP experience in the Outpost Rush. So they have things in the game right now, but in order for them to become a very big game when it comes to the PvE driving it, they are going to have to get some form of raids. Now, contrary to popular belief, there's not a lot of people that do high-end raiding. I know it's something that a lot of games strive for, but the actual percentage of people that actually do end-game raiding is actually pretty small. But I still think it needs to be in the game for people to drive towards that. Now, most people that'll drive towards the end-game PvE never actually get there. That's kind of the sad state of gaming, because for one, it's actually typically pretty hard to get into a group. You have to have either some established knowledge, you have to, pug it a bunch, or there's different ways you have to actually get into scaling that. So a lot of people don't actually end up getting into it, but a lot of people have to drive towards it. And then I think your group system has to be really good and support big groups. Currently, we do the 50v50, but it's still only small groups. They would have to add something in there to have a raid to where maybe you can have parties of 5 and then maybe do a 10-man raid, but it's 2 parties of 5, and you can kind of see it. They'll just put them right next to each other. So that could be something they could do, but they currently don't have a system in there. But we are still talking about launch. Even ESO didn't actually have a raid at launch. You think of ESO, you think of either its small scale stuff where people do their soloing stuff, or you think of all the raids it has when it comes to PvE, because ESO has a ton of raids along with a ton of dungeons as well. But they have a lot of raids as well, but they didn't actually have those at launch, contrary to what people, tend to remember. So in order for them to actually be a big MMO, they are going to have to add in either some extremely tough 5-man content and a decent amount of it, or more than likely some 10-man raid style content that has some really good PvE gear. So now that we've established what they would need to do to get PvE, let's talk about PvP. PvP, if that's going to be the main driving force, it's got to have some form of territory control, which they do, in my opinion, or another way of sieging, which they have their city sieges, which can happen pretty often. They have to have constant PvP, which we'll see if they have. We have the outpost rush, we have the fort battles, but we'll have to see if in a month, 2 months, 3 months, if the PvP still continues to be fought over those forts, or if people kind of go their separate ways, go to their zones, and that's where they kind of stay. Now, it kind of ended up being that way a little bit in the beta, which was one thing I mentioned that I was a little bit afraid of, because at the very beginning, the PvP was absolutely amazing and some of the funnest PvP that I've ever played. But as the beta went on and on, people tended to either, I don't want to say not play as much because there were a lot of people on. I just think less people flagged up. And if they did, they stayed in their area just so that maybe they could either progress, or we'll see. Now, people didn't reach 60, which is the big thing, which is the level cap. Once you get to 60, then everything kind of turns on its head for PvP and stuff like that, because you still have to progress your character, but you in theory have more time to do stuff. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Or they have to have some form of big mechanic leaderboard type of arena that really drives PvP. Now, I'm not a huge fan of arena PvP. I really like it in some instances in some games, and I really hate it in others. I really enjoyed it in Guild Wars 2. I thought they had a great system. It really rewarded you for doing PvP. But in ESO, where I did it a lot, I really didn't find it that entertaining after a while. You were climbing for essentially no reason. You didn't get any leaderboards. You got some crappy rewards of the worthy that were crap, and you really didn't feel like you did anything when you completed it. Where at least in something like Guild Wars, you actually felt a sense of accomplishment for the leaderboards and your rank, and you got really good rewards as you did it. And I really think they would need something like that to keep that going. Now, they have, if you don't know, have come a long way when it comes to PvP. They have put a lot of effort into putting more and more PvP in the game. So they'll have to continuously do that. And again, we're looking at more of a year or two down the road before the game will truly be a big MMO. Because let's be real, the game is going to have a monster population at release. It is going to have, in my opinion, 500,000 people are going to play this game at release. People don't think that, but there was 250 concurrent players at like day 6 of the beta or something like that. It was absolutely crazy. There will be a monster population. And I know many people that didn't play the beta all of but 5 minutes because they didn't want to get burnt out and they wanted to experience everything naturally, and they didn't want to actually go into the game and ruin the traditional MMO experience, that you play for the first time. But it is going to be a monster population, 500,000 people upwards, I think. The first week of launch, it's going to be massive. Now, how we judge, or how I judge the next big MMO, is going to be over a year or 2 year span of time. Every MMO, like I said, is going to be big, and then they're going to get smaller. So will New World be the next big MMO? In my opinion, yes. And I say this for a couple reasons. One, the base game is absolutely amazing. Now, if you don't like the combat, if you don't like stuff about the game, then maybe wait and see if they change it. But to most of us that have played, and to the hundreds and not thousands of people in my comment sections talking about how much they love the game, they're right there with me. They love the game so much. It has one of the best cores of an MMO that I've ever played. ESO had a pretty high population. It dropped down. Same thing with WoW, same thing with Final Fantasy, and I'm only bringing those three up because, like I said, they are the monster games right now. But I think it'll get there. Now, having said that, they are going to have to come out with different type of experiences in the game. They're going to have to come out with more PvE stuff. They're going to have to come out with more PvP stuff. They could really lean into the PvE, but they have shown that they want to add in PvP as well. They've really went down the PvE train, but they've also put in a lot of PvP stuff. They put in Outpost Rush. They put in fort battles. They did a flagging system. They upgraded the flagging system. Now, they did decrease some of the experience and stuff like that you gained, which I'd like to see them bring back because you want people to flag for PvP. But if they continue the trend that they did over the last year, if you haven't paid attention, the amount of work that they've done in the last year is absolutely incredible and absolutely insane. It rivals almost any other game that I've ever played for a 1 year span of time. I trashed this game a year ago. When they had their open beta, I played it very little because I'd played the alpha beforehand and I hated the game. I hated the combat system. I hated everything about it, but they have done so much work in the last year. I truly think with what they've told us, and if they continuously put out content steadily over the next year to 2 years, and obviously continuously after that, this game will be the 4th biggest MMO in North America. That even includes new MMOs that are coming out, like Lost Ark. That includes things like Core Punk. That includes things like Bless Online / Unleashed. No, obviously it's going to beat that game. That game's going to be dead in like a week. But it's going to be the 4th biggest MMO, just behind ESO, Final Fantasy, WoW. And I say just behind, meaning not in numbers. They're not going to reach that numbers. It's almost impossible for a game to reach those numbers right off the bat. Final Fantasy, which has been an insane game for so long, has taken this long for them to actually overthrow WoW. So when it comes to being the next big MMO, you know, I judge it by being at the level of Black Desert, which is the last successful MMO that's actually came out. Like, even before that, we had what, Blade and Soul, Arcade is a couple years before it, but Revelation Online, like a bunch of these crappy MMOs that nobody plays. And Blade and Soul's fine, but we haven't had one in a while, and Black Desert's been our last successful one. And I think it's a very small possibility that New World is not a higher population than Black Desert in a year to 2 years. I would be extremely shocked. Not only for their PvE, which people are going to enjoy as long as they, like I said, continuously come out with stuff, which they said they're going to, but they're going to still give some love to the PvP players, which is nice. There's not many games out there that have a PvE system that actually gives love to the PvP players. All right, so let me know in the comments section down below if you agree with me. If you don't, let me know where you think that New World is going to be ranked in, let's say, 2 years' time. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. There is going to be so much New World content coming out. We're going to be still putting out content now until release. The week before it launches, we will have guides up. We're going to wait to do that. I even recorded some things I got to make sure continuously stay the same when it comes to like gearing and stuff like that. We'll put out a leveling guide again. We'll put out a bunch of stuff for New World the week before, but we're going to do more of these type of blog style what ifs. We're going to have a where New World's going to be in a year prediction. I'll have that, which kind of ties into this video, but we're going to have a bunch of other videos. A should you buy, of course, that's always extremely popular, and people like to see that. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Twitch.tv/Parfaxgaming. When New World launches, we are going absolutely hard in the paint. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.